Welcome to a new deep dive. Today we're tackling a fascinating question that's probably on a lot of our minds. How do you find your footing when life feels stuck in a perpetual winter season? We've all felt that chill, right? Whether it's the big global stuff like pandemics, political chaos, economic uncertainty, or maybe it's the really personal struggles,
Yeah.
divorce, health problems, or just profound loneliness.
hmm
These are those times when it feels like warmth is just, well, packed up and left, and you're left searching for springtime.
Precisely. And today we're going to unpack some really powerful insights from a book that offers, well, a pretty unexpected guide through these kinds of Arctic winters. It's Max Lucado's You Were Made for This Moment.
Okay.
And in this deep dive, we're exploring how an ancient biblical story, the Book of Esther, actually provides these profound messages of hope and courage, insights that feel, frankly, urgently needed in our often chaotic world.
So our mission today is to pull out the most important nuggets of knowledge from this source. We want to show you how the author argues that these moments of confusion and crisis can actually lead to conquest,
Right.
and why he believes the impossible is where powerful change often starts and, well, miracles are what can follow.
Yeah, and the Book of Esther, as the source explains it, was written precisely for those times, for people feeling emotionally weary. Those who feel outnumbered by foes, maybe outmaneuvered by fate, or just outdone by fear. It's presented as a story of what the author calls God's quiet providence, which is basically his continuous control over history, even when he seems most distant or silent.
Okay, quiet providence. Let's hold on to that. The book starts by painting a really vivid picture of these winter seasons. It talks about global events, COVID-19, political chaos, riots, recession,
Yeah.
but then it gets deeply personal.
It really does. That's where it hits home for many, I think. The author shares some poignant examples, like a mom of three, two in diapers, one with a disability. Her husband's gone, her restaurant job disappeared due to the pandemic, just left wondering if winter will ever end.
Wow, tough.
Yeah. And another friend, his wife is in a memory care facility, so he's sleeping alone, visiting a woman who just stares out the window, the life they planned, just gone.
Oof. And the book asks you directly, doesn't it? Like, when did you first realize life wasn't going to turn out the way you thought? Maybe parents divorced, a spouse cheated, health issues lingered, a friend never came back.
Exactly. These moments, the book suggests, can settle a kind of Siberian cold over your life.
Yeah.
And the Book of Esther, it argues, is sort of God's six-letter word of encouragement for these times. It's presented as this eyewitness account of a triumph of divine drama set way back in 5th century BC Persia, an empire that controlled like almost half the world's population then.
It's incredible scale.
It is. And what's fascinating is how universal these feelings of winter and despair really are,
Oh.
spanning millennia.
Okay, so let's unpack this ancient drama. Let's introduce the main characters, this memorable quartet. First up, King Xerxes. How's he described?
Well, the source pulls no punches, calls him a clueless brute, marked by a thirst for wine, a disregard for women, and convictions that changed with the weather. Basically, easily sway, comfortable, delegating big decisions.
Even genocide,
Even
apparently.
genocide, yeah. Then there's Haman, the villain. His name even sounds like hangman, interestingly.
Right.
He's wealthy, influential, and the book uses a really strong language, says he had the swagger of a pimp and the compassion of Hitler, demanded worship, set out to exterminate the entire Jewish race, saw them as just inconsequential flecks of dandruff.
Wow. Chilling description. Okay, so who stands against him?
Well, you have Mordecai. He's an exiled Jew, a descendant of King Saul, initially described as kind of quiet, content, someone who chose to keep his Jewish identity under wraps.
Keeping a low profile.
Right. And then there's Esther, Mordecai's cousin, an orphan, described as having a lovely figure and was beautiful. She gets access to the king because of her looks, sure, but her story's real relevance, the source argues, comes from her inner conviction and courage.
Okay, so we have the players. But what's really striking, and you mentioned this earlier, is that the Book of Esther never actually names God. Not once. Which makes you ask, where is God in all this?
And that's precisely the point the source hammers home. Because if you're in one of those winter seasons yourself, that feeling of silence, of absence, can feel very real.
Yeah, absolutely.
So the book introduces this powerful idea of quiet providence. Remember that?
Yes.
It's described as God's continuous control over history, sustaining everything. The quote is something like, "He need not be loud to be strong. He need not cast a shadow to be present." The idea is God's still eloquent even in seeming silence, still active when he appears most distant.
That's quite a thought. God working behind the scenes even when not explicitly mentioned.
Exactly. It really underpins the whole narrative that Lucado presents.
Okay, so the book lays things out in 3 acts. Act 1 is called Confusion, and it describes God's people kind of choosing the glamour of Persia over maybe deeper spiritual values.
Yeah.
Compromise over conviction.
That's the angle, yeah. This act carries a strong warning. Don't get cozy in Persia.
Don't get too comfortable in the seemingly attractive culture around you.
Precisely. The author shares this personal story, actually, about being fooled by a beautiful field of winter wheat. Looked great on top, but underneath it was all rocks and sticky mud. Broke his tractor, and he likens it to life. Things aren't always what they seem. What's too good to be true usually is. It's a great little analogy for how surface appeal can hide real problems.
Makes sense. And we see this play out with Xerxes, right? His huge 180-day banquet meant to show off his power.
Yeah, but it backfires spectacularly when Queen Vashti refuses his command to basically parade herself in front of his drunk buddies.
Right.
Her refusal makes him look weak. Namby-pamby is the phrase used. So she gets banished, and then there's this ridiculous decree sent out against all disobedient wives.
It's just bizarre. But for the Jews living in Persia at the time, Persia offered, what, wealth, security.
It did. And many chose to stay there after the exile ended rather than return to Jerusalem. They embraced the culture. Mordecai himself, the book points out, lived right in the citadel, on duty at the palace, working for this pagan king.
Mm-hmm.
And even his name, Mordecai, isn't Hebrew. It's likely an adaptation of Marduk, a major Babylonian god.
Okay, so he's assimilated to some extent, and he tells Esther to do the same, right? Her Hebrew name was Hadassah, meaning myrtle, suggesting righteousness.
Right, but he tells her to hide her nationality, her family background, and her Persian name, Esther. It's likely linked to Ishtar, the main pagan goddess.
So clear signs of fitting in.
Definitely. And she enters this, essentially, beauty contest to become queen, knowing it involves spending a night with a Gentile king, which would have been against Jewish law.
So the source argues they both disguised their identity, they conformed.
Yes. And it's likened, again, personally by the author, to him in middle school taking off his Abilene Christian sweatshirt because he didn't want the cool kids to see him as overtly Christian. It raises that timeless question, doesn't it? How easily we can compromise to fit in or avoid trouble.
It really does. And this deep dive highlights how, as the author says, tough times can trigger poor decisions. It warns you, the listener, not to get lured into lifestyles that seem appealing but might ultimately leave you wounded and weary.
Mm-hmm.
It challenges what it calls the lies of modern Persias. Things like pornography, materialism, that whoever dies with the most toys wins, idea, and excessive alcohol. The source links these, in the author's view, to rising rates of depression, divorce, suicide.
Yeah, the insight here is really a challenge to look critically at where maybe we are compromising our core values for, I don't know, temporary comfort or acceptance, and how those small compromises can lead us down a bad path.
It's a strong call to self-reflection.
And the powerful message that comes out of this section from the author is, this is the time to stand out and assist. We were made for this moment. It's a call to remember who you are and whose you are. Not just, a citizen of some future heaven, but, as the book puts it, the presence of Jesus in this world right now, living out your convictions, not just blending in.
Okay. So Act 1 sets the stage with the dangers of compromise. Now we move into Act 2, Crisis. This is where things really escalate and the call to courage gets loud.
That's right. So 5 years have passed since Esther became queen. Haman, who's been promoted by the king, gets absolutely enraged because Mordecai refuses to bow down to him. Day after day, Mordecai stands firm.
Just refuses.
Just refuses. And this defiance eventually forces Mordecai to reveal why. He tells them plainly Mordecai had told them that he was a Jew.
So it wasn't just disrespect, it was tied to his identity and faith.
Exactly, and it gets deeper. The source explains Haman was an Agagite. Now, that might not mean much to us, but Agagites were descendants of the Amalekites, ancient bitter enemies of the Hebrews.
Okay. And Mordecai, he was a Benjamite, a descendant of King Saul, the very king who, centuries before, had been commanded by God to destroy the Amalekites, including their king Agag, but failed to finish the job.
Wow. So this isn't just personal animosity. This is like Centuries of historical conflict boiling over in this one moment.
Precisely. 10 centuries of deep-seated bias and hatred ignited by Mordecai's refusal to bow.
So Haman's rage isn't just about Mordecai anymore.
No way. It goes way beyond that. He wants to destroy all Mordecai's people, the Jews, throughout the whole kingdom of Xerxes. Total annihilation.
Good grief.
And he goes to the king and offers this insane amount of money, 10,000 talents of silver, maybe $20 million today, just for the permission to do it.
And the king.
The king just nonchalantly agrees, gives Haman his signet ring, basically saying, do whatever you want.
Unbelievable. So an official edict goes out to all the provinces. It sets a specific date for the execution, but it's 11 months away. And this is where the source really emphasizes that idea of providence again, quoting Proverbs. People throw lots to make a decision, but the answer comes from the Lord.
So the author suggests even the casting of lots to pick the date and the long delay wasn't random.
Exactly, that God orchestrated this delay to allow his own plan to unfold, turning what seemed like chance into a crucial window of opportunity.
That's fascinating. And this ancient story then becomes a framework for thinking about our own Mordecai moments, right?
Yes, the author poses the question directly to you, the listener. How do you respond when maybe family members mock your beliefs? Or a professor ridicules your faith, colleagues gossip about your convictions? Or you just feel pressure to compromise, to stay silent when you see injustice?
Those moments definitely happen.
They do, and the source gives these powerful examples of courage. The ISIS martyrs in Libya, moments from death, calling out to Jesus. One man, apparently not even a Christian before that moment, declared, "Their God is my God."
Wow.
There's August Landmesser, that German worker in the famous photo, the only one not giving the Nazi salute to Hitler in 1936. He knew the risk.
Incredible bravery.
And the biblical story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego refusing to bow to Nebuchadnezzar's statue, surviving the fiery furnace. The author's point, courage is contagious.
It inspires others.
Yeah.
Okay, so Mordecai is distraught about this extermination decree. He's in mourning. And this leads to Esther's pivotal moment.
Right. Mordecai gets word to Esther inside the palace, but she hesitates at first. She reminds him about the law. Approach the king uninvited, and you could be killed unless he holds out the golden scepter.
Well, it wasn't guaranteed.
Not at all. Especially since, she adds, it had been 30 days since the king had even called for her. She might have been out of favor.
Risky. Very risky.
Extremely. But then Mordecai delivers what the source calls some of the most profound words in the entire book. He tells her essentially, don't think that just because you're in the palace, you'll escape when all the other Jews are killed.
Oof. Harsh truth.
Yeah. He warns her that even if she stays silent, relief and deliverance for the Jews will arise from another place, but you and your father's family will perish. In other words, God's plan will succeed, but she might miss her chance to be part of it and face consequences.
Wow. That's heavy.
And then comes that incredibly famous, powerful question. And who knows but that you have come to your royal position for such a time as this?
For such a time as this. That line just resonates, doesn't it? It really forces you to think about your own purpose, your own moment.
Absolutely. It's a direct call to consider why you are where you are right now. And this message, it completely transforms Esther.
How so?
She sends word back to Mordecai, tells him to gather all the Jews in the capital city, Susa, and to fast for me. No food or water for 3 days and nights. She and her attendants would do the same.
Okay, so spiritual preparation first.
Crucially. And then she declares, I will go to the king, even though it is against the law. And if I perish, I perish. Total commitment. Total courage.
Wow. If I perish, I perish.
And the source really emphasizes her decision to, quote, retreat into the prayer chamber before rushing into the king's throne room. The argument is that it wasn't her beauty or charm, but her prayers, her fasting, her reliance on God that truly made the difference.
That's a key insight.
Yeah, the author asks pointedly, what if the only thing between you and a season of refreshing is prayer?
It challenges you to prioritize that spiritual connection, especially in crisis.
Exactly. The book urges engagement in heartfelt prayer, drawing parallels to Daniel in Babylon, who humbled himself, pleaded for mercy, and, according to the Bible, received an immediate angelic response.
So prayer isn't just passive waiting, it's active engagement.
That's the perspective here. The author even shares a personal story from the summer of 2020, leading a citywide prayer event in San Antonio focused on repenting for racism. He describes kneeling, repenting for his own silence on the issue, his ancestors' sins. And afterwards, a young African-American woman came up to him and said something like, That's all I needed to hear to keep from giving up.
Powerful impact.
It highlights, for the author, the tangible effect of genuine repentance and prayer. It can change hearts, offer hope, make a real difference.
So the message from the source seems crystal clear here. The moment you bow your head to pray is the moment God lifts his hand to help.
That's the core takeaway from Act 2. Prayer fuels courage, and courage leads to action.
Okay, so we've had confusion, then crisis. That brings us to Act 3, conquest. This is where, as the author puts it, the unimaginable happens and sorrow turn to joy.
Exactly. And the source contrasts this with something like the butterfly effect, that popular idea that tiny random events can trigger huge consequences.
Right, chaos theory.
Yeah. The book pushes back on that randomness. It argues instead that God is the blessed controller of all things. Not chaos, but providence, even in the small stuff.
Okay, so how does that play out in the story? How is God in the details?
Well, the sequence of events that follows is just remarkable. It starts with King Xerxes having a sleepless night. Just can't sleep.
We've all been there.
Right. So, to pass the time, he asks for the royal chronicles, the official records, to be read to him.
Okay.
And the attendant who's reading just happens to read the entry about Mordecai uncovering that assassination plot against the king years earlier. An act of loyalty that, the record noted, had gone completely unrewarded.
Ah, the forgotten good deed.
Precisely. And right at that exact moment, Haman walks into the outer court of the palace.
No way.
Yes. And why is he there so early? He's come specifically to ask the king's permission to impale Mordecai on the brand new 75-foot-tall gallows he had just built for him the night before.
You couldn't make this stuff up. The timing is just insane.
It's extraordinary. And the book argues, of course, that this is that quiet providence we talked about, seemingly random details, sleeplessness, the specific page read, Haman's arrival, all orchestrated.
Okay, so Haman's there waiting. What happens next?
The king, thinking about the unrewarded Mordecai, sees Haman and calls him in. Then he asks Haman this question: what should be done for the man the king delights to honor?
Oh, this is going to be good.
It is. Haman, being the narcissist he is, immediately assumes the king is talking about him. Who else would the king want to honor so lavishly?
Of course.
So Haman suggests this incredibly elaborate public ceremony, put the king's own royal robe on the man, put him on the king's own horse, have a high official lead him through the city streets proclaiming, this is what is done for the man the king delights to honor.
He's basically planning his own parade.
Totally. And then comes the punchline. Xerxes says, great idea, go at once. Get the robe and the horse and do just as you have suggested for Mordecai the Jew who sits at the king's gate. Don't leave out a single detail you recommended.
Oh my goodness. The look on Haman's face must have been priceless.
Can you imagine? The source calls it poetic justice. The man Haman wanted to see impaled on a 75-foot spike, he now has to dress in the king's robes, put on the king's horse, and lead through the city shouting praises for him.
The ultimate humiliation.
Yeah.
Led by his archenemy.
It's a stunning reversal. The narrative underscores again, God orchestrated all the details. Haman afterwards rushed home mourning with his head covered, utterly defeated in that moment.
Okay, so that's a major turning point. But the execution decree is still in place, right?
Still technically in place. The climax comes during Esther's second banquet, which she had cleverly arranged, inviting only the king and Haman.
Ah, the second dinner party.
Yes. The king, perhaps softened by the day's events or just enjoying himself, again asks Esther, what is your petition? It will be given you. What is your request? Even up to half the kingdom, it will be granted.
He really seems to like her.
He does, and this time, Esther goes for it. She bravely reveals her hidden identity. If I have found favor with you, your majesty, and if it pleases you, grant me my life, this is my petition, and spare my people, this is my request.
Wow, laying it all on the line.
Absolutely. She continues, for I and my people have been sold to be destroyed, killed, and annihilated. And then, when the shocked king asks who would dare do such a thing, she points directly at Haman and says, an adversary and enemy, this wicked Haman.
The tension must have been unbearable.
Haman is described as being filled with terror, utterly exposed. The king flies into a rage, storms out into the palace garden to cool off.
Okay.
While the king is out, Haman, desperate, throws himself onto the couch where Esther is reclining, begging for his life.
Probably not a good move.
Definitely not. The king walks back in at that exact moment and sees Haman basically falling all over the queen. He misinterprets it entirely, or maybe pretends to, shouting, will he even molest the queen while she is with me in the house?
Oh, that seals it.
It does. As soon as the king speaks, the guards cover Haman's face, a sign of condemnation. And then another one of those coincidences, an attendant speaks up. Look, a gallows 75 feet high stands by Haman's house. He had it made for Mordecai, who spoke up to help the king.
Talk about convenient information.
Right, and the king's response is immediate. Impale him on it. So Haman is executed on the very gallows he built for Mordecai.
Wow. The reversal is complete.
Absolutely complete. And this, the source highlights, illustrates that theme of divine justice. Our God is a just God, the author writes. Nothing escapes him. No one escapes him. The wicked will not win. That's the core belief presented here.
It's a powerful narrative arc. Confusion, crisis, and then this dramatic conquest.
And the source doesn't just leave it in ancient history. It shares some inspiring modern stories, too, arguing they show the same kind of divine intervention in the details.
Like what?
Well, there's a story about a suicidal mother. She was planning her final act, had everything set up. But then a series of small, unexpected things leads her to a bookstore where she happens upon the author's children's book, Tell Me the Story. Reading it changes her mind, saves her life. Small, seemingly random events, but with huge consequences.
Wow. That's profound.
Yeah. And another, maybe more globally significant one, Alexander Solzhenitsyn, the famous Russian writer and dissident. He apparently converted to Christianity while imprisoned in a Soviet gulag.
Really?
Through conversations with a fellow prisoner, a Jewish doctor who was also a secret Christian, Solzhenitsyn's later writings, deeply informed by his faith and prison experiences, arguably played a significant role in exposing the brutality of the Soviet system and contributing to the eventual collapse of Eastern communism.
So, just like Esther finding her courage that impossible moment, these modern stories suggest that conviction, purpose, transformation can emerge from the darkest places.
That's exactly the connection the author makes. It's a modern echo of that for such a time as this idea. God working through individuals in critical moments, often using seemingly small details to achieve significant outcomes.
What an incredible exploration, this deep dive into a story that, yeah, it spans millennia, but it really does speak so directly to the struggles we face today.
Mhm.
The Book of Esther, as unpacked in You Were Made for This Moment, really drives home that message. Winters don't last forever.
That's right. When the world feels like it's spinning off its axis, the author argues you can hold on to this truth. Butterfly wings don't determine the course of history, God does. Working through that quiet providence, orchestrating details, bringing about those grand reversals.
Confusion and crisis truly can give way to conquest, according to this perspective. It's about trusting that larger plan.
Mm-hmm. This deep dive is ultimately a reminder that, from the book's viewpoint, deliverance will come. God will have his victory. The real question isn't, will God prevail?
What is it then?
The question the author leaves us with is, will you be part of the team? Will you answer the call when your moment comes?
That really brings it back to personal responsibility, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So, as you, our listeners, reflect on this deep dive, maybe consider this provocative thought from the source material. This is your moment. You were made to stand up like Mordecai, to speak up like Esther.
Yeah. And when that invitation comes, that nudge to be part of what the author sees as God's holy work in the world, the hope is that you might hear the same spirit that Reverend King heard, find the same courage Esther found, and make the same kind of decisive, faithful decision Mordecai made.
A powerful call to action.
It is. As the author concludes, relief will come. May God help you and me to be a part of it.